What's going on? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to do a video of matchmaking the next UFC fighters after UFC 303, talk about who I think they should fight next, when they should fight, and ultimately when everything should go down after UFC 303. Let's get right into the video. Okay, the first fight I want to start with is the main event, Alex Pereira and him getting the win over Jiri Prochazka, and him fighting the only person left in the light heavyweight division for him to fight, and that is Magomed Ankalaev. I think that this fight for Alex Pereira is going to be Alex Pereira's toughest challenge yet in the UFC light heavyweight division, just because of Magomed Ankalaev's wrestling and grappling ability. Now, I know Magomed Ankalaev just came out and said he's going to knock out Alex Pereira, and if he tries to do that, he's going to get flatlined, and that's going to be the easiest fight for Alex Pereira yet. But if Magomed Ankalaev mixes up the grappling and with the striking, I think that this fight is going to be a really hard test for Alex Pereira. If Alex Pereira goes out there and beats Magomed Ankalaev, that grants him a chance at the third belt, possibly versus Tom Aspinall or John Jones, barring that he beats Stipe and does not retire and does not want to fight Tom Aspinall. Okay, Jiri Prochazka just got knocked out against Alex Pereira, and I got two people for him. One person would be Jamal Hill, but I don't think that fight's going to go down. I still think that you keep Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree Jr. coming up here very soon, but the name that I came in my head was Nikita Krylov. He just beat Ryan Spann in his last fight, and he's been out of the UFC for the probably over a year now. And I think Nikita Krylov versus Jiri Prochazka would be an amazing fight to put on. Give Jiri someone lower in the rankings for him just to get another win under his belt, and give Krylov that shot at one of the top contenders in the UFC light heavyweight division. Okay, Diego Lopez just came out and said that he wants to fight Brian Ortega and Alexander Volkanovski, and I don't think either of those names are realistic right now. Not saying that he can't fight Alexander Volkanovski, but I think Volkanovski is going to want to wait a little bit longer, and Brian Ortega is rumored to be going up to lightweight, so that leaves me with one person that he could fight at UFC 303 in the Sphere, and that is a fight against Yair Rodriguez, and I think that fight would be box office. That would probably be one of the best fights you could put on in the UFC featherweight division currently, and I think Diego Lopez would have a really good time with Yair Rodriguez, considering his striking ability, his lack of grappling, Diego Lopez's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and ultimately I think that this is the fight that Diego Lopez wants because it boosts him up in the rankings, as well as giving him a favorable matchup against Yair Rodriguez, and putting on possibly fight of the night at UFC 306 in Las Vegas. Okay, Dan Ige just stepped in on 4 hours notice at UFC 303 to fight Diego Lopez, and I think you should put him at UFC 306 at the Sphere. And one name that came to mind was Sean Woodson. He's right under Dan Ige, out of the featherweight rankings, and I think that this fight would be super, super fun to put on. Have Dan Ige, a very nice power puncher, a good, very high-Q'd fighter, with Sean Woodson, a very big, tall, lanky fighter in the UFC featherweight division. Put them together at UFC 306 in the Las Vegas Sphere, and that makes Dan Ige happy, and that gives him a worthy opponent to go throw down with. Okay, Ian Gary just beat Michael Venom Page at UFC 303 by a grappling clinic, which did drop Ian Gary's stock a little bit, but I still think that grants him a fight with Kamaru Usman. I think I've co-main event at UFC 310 at UFC, or the last fight card in Las Vegas, and I think a fight with Kamaru Usman would be a very intelligent and a very interesting fight for Ian Gary to have. I think that Kamaru Usman's grappling would be an incredibly hard task for Ian Gary, although I do think Ian Gary's stand-up and striking ability would give Kamaru Usman some troubles on the feet. Ultimately, I think that this would be an incredible next step up for Ian Gary, and I think he does have a chance on beating Kamaru Usman, but this would easily be Ian Gary's hardest fight to date, fighting a former champion in Kamaru Usman, and I truly believe that Ian Gary, if he beats Kamaru Usman, would be granted a title shot possibly at UFC International Fight Week 2025. Michael Venom Page just lost to Ian Gary, but it was in a very weird fight where he was just taken down, and he wasn't it's not that he didn't look good, it's just he doesn't look good in the grappling department. So I think that you give Michael Venom Page someone like Jeff Neal, who is a little bit higher in the rankings of him. Jeff Neal has lost his past 2 fights, that being to Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Gary, which are 2 names that are going to possibly be in the top 3 in the UFC welterweight rankings coming here very soon. And I think a fight against Jeff Neal, who is an incredible power puncher, has some grappling ability, going against MVP, who is one of the best strikers in the UFC currently, would be an incredible matchup with fireworks bursting everywhere. I think that this fight for MVP would be a very favorable matchup for MVP, looking at the entirety of the welterweight rankings, where Jeff Neal would be able to deploy some grappling, and this would be an incredibly fun fight to put on the UFC welterweight rankings. The next fighter I want to go to is Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer just beat Marc-Andre Barriault at UFC 303 by insane knockout. And I think it's time to give Joe Pyfer someone like Chris Curtis if he's going to come back sometime very, very soon. I think a fight at MSG could be a very fun fight. Have Joe Pyfer fight Chris Curtis, who just tore his hamstring against Brendan Allen. And I think that Joe Pyfer could possibly flatline KO Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis trains at Extreme Couture out there with Sean Strickland, so he's training with some of the best middleweights in the entire world. And Joe Pyfer is training in Philadelphia with someone with the likes of Sean Brady, where I think that Joe Pyfer now deserves a shot back in the top 15 after he just lost in February to Jack Hermanson. Joe Pyfer is one of the best up-and-coming prospects. That hype train got derailed a little bit against Jack Hermanson, but in the fight against Marc-Andre Barriault, he looked amazing out there. And I think a fight with Chris Curtis in Madison Square Garden in UFC 309 on the main card would be something that everyone would love to see. And lastly, the fighter I want to talk about is Peyton Talbot. I think a fight for Peyton Talbot with who he called out, Adrian Yanez, would be an amazing next step up. Adrian Yanez has stepped into the octagon with the likes of Rob Font. Yes, he did get KO'd in the first round, but Adrian Yanez was at one point in the top 10 of the UFC bantamweight rankings, and he has dropped down. He had an injury, and he just stepped back in the octagon. But I do think a fight between Adrian Yanez and Peyton Talbot would be a next step up and a good opponent for Peyton Talbot to fight. He's fight the likes of Yannis Garamari and someone else who was Australian. I forgot his name in February or March, where he absolutely destroyed him with a TKO in the second round. Peyton Talbot is one of the best up-and-coming prospects in the UFC currently, and I think a next step up against Adrian Yanez would be an amazing fight, an amazing test for Peyton Talbot to have before he got into the top 15. Thank you guys so much for watching this UFC matchmaking after UFC 303. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the UFC content. Please leave comments down below about if you believe these matchups are fair, if you think that they should fight someone else, because I'm trying to respond to as many comments as possible. If you enjoy the content, like I said, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I know most people who watch these videos are not subscribed, and if you do, that would mean a lot to me. If you did, we're on the road to 200 subscribers, and I will see you guys very soon, and hopefully you guys enjoy the UFC content.